On today's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, we talk once again to my good friend Skip Lackey, who will give us a ton of information on the journey process, and it is something you do not want to miss. Here we go. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. So I am back with Skip Lackey. Skip, thank you for being here again. I so much enjoyed our first visit. I just had to have you back and pick up where we left off, hopefully. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Doug, and you.
Yeah, couldn't complain if I tried. It's been great. Lovely summer weather. It's been good. Fortunately, knock on wood, it's been survivable so far.
Yeah, we've had all the smoke from the California fires, but it's starting to clear up today.
We've had some pretty amazing sunsets. Amazing how much it affects even the East Coast.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we didn't see the sun for probably 3 or 4 days. It was completely blocked.
Because of smoke.
Yes. I mean, you could not see probably 150 feet away from you. It was that bad. And they were telling everybody, don't go outside. We've got the worst air quality of anywhere in the world right now, a couple days ago. Yeah.
That covers a lot of territory. So Boulder, Colorado has the worst air quality in the world.
We did 2 days ago, right? Denver did because of the California fires, not because of what's going on here. All the fires are pretty much out.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, well, listen, last time when we were speaking, we kind of left off talking about the journey process. We talked a little bit about your journey coming through New York City and acting and juggling,
right.
Barnum and Bailey and all that sort of thing. And we got into the journey process, which you, in a sense, almost helped to create with Brandon Bays. You were there when she went through the original process herself in a little point holding session that you guys did. So I actually would like to start there, but today I also do want to talk to you more about the campfire process and the forgiveness process that within the journey. And hopefully we'll have enough time to get, even to what you're doing in 2021, the work that you're doing now. And because that's pretty exciting as well. And I just don't want to give that any short shrift, but we can maybe get you back for a third episode if we can't cover it all today.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I think we talked last time it's going to be the Skip Lackey podcast after a while.
Well, there's lots to share.
So let me just stop and say we both of us did a thing with Brandon Bays and her husband at the time, Bob Bays, called Body Electronics.
Right.
And Body Electronics, just for those who don't know, and I'm sure that's probably most people, because it was pretty small
niche of people who were doing it, right?
Yeah. But what you needed to do for Body Electronics is first you needed to prepare for a session of Body Electronics with drinking a lot of chelated colloidal minerals,
right?
That were mined somewhere in Arizona, I think, and then one person would be the point hold E, and they would lie on a massage table, and then 6. Whatever many people you could assemble, but let's say at least 1 up to 6 people would hold acupressure points on that person on the table. So we sort of sit around the table and everybody would hold assigned acupressure points based on the person's need. And that was assessed by doing iridology and various other assessments to find out what their needs were as far as what they needed to be changed in their body. And intense stuff, and those sessions could last 4 hours or so
or more.
But we saw amazing changes happen. People would change. Oh my God, it was quite remarkable. And so Brandon was having a situation. I think she had a ovarian cyst or something like that.
She had a uterine tumor.
Okay, and called you and other people to come to where she lived in I think Malibu at the time to do a point holding for her. Yeah,
because that's what she and her husband at the time, Bob, really knew. That's what they were using. So
right.
Yeah, and she assembled a small team of people,
right?
And we all started drinking the minerals, which was like a gallon. I think we had to drink. I can't even remember how much it was.
I think it was actually different for the person undergoing the point holding. They had to drink like a gallon of the stuff, but the people who were assisting holding points, we only had to drink like 6 ounces every hour or something. I don't know, but it was a lot.
Well, it was for like a week before.
Yeah, no, I know.
Remember. Yeah, it's a big preparation and a big commitment to pull together a group of people or a team or friends. And at this time, they were her friends, and we all volunteered.
Or you had to be friends, basically. It was a commitment. It was a friendly,
really intense.
You couldn't pay somebody.
Probably one of the most intense kind of healing experiences I had been through up until that point.
Yeah. So, in that process with her, when she was holding the points, she got much of what the expected results were through that, and within that process, she had something was a little different, you said. This time that sort of became the journey process from that experience. Is that accurate?
Yeah, she had this spontaneous experience on the table with an old memory of some trauma from her childhood, that it was some abuse. And she talks about this in her book to a certain extent. She doesn't go into great detail about it.
But it's entitled The Journey.
During her seminar, right, The Journey, that she's written, and it's sold over 1 million copies around the world. It's been it's huge in Europe and the Commonwealth countries. It got picked up. It's like one of the normal books that everybody reads as they're going through their kind of their awakening experience, so to speak. Wow. And she's, very well known elsewhere around the world, not so much here in the United States. So she had this experience, and then she sat down because 3.5 weeks later, her tumor, which was the size of a small basketball.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Went away with no drugs and no surgery. She started sloughing off the tumor within days of going through this process. And that experience really sat with her, and she formulated a script that she could do with her personal clients, which then turned into a workshop. And she's taught thousands of practitioners around the world how to do this process.
So let me just stop you. If I could stop you there. So do you think that it's possible for a person to have that same kind of result without the body electronics component of it? Can the journey create physiological healing like Brandon experienced just through the journey, separate from body electronics?
Absolutely. And I've seen it happen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And even with my own work, my own private work, I've seen people that would say, oh my gosh, this is a miracle happen without the body electronics part of it. So I think that the body electronics at the time, it was so powerful, right? And but what I've come to terms with after working with probably, over 25,000 people with doing the workshops and watching it happen on a regular basis. I mean, it happened every weekend that we did workshops. We would have people have spontaneous healing, is really in the emptying out of what we've talked about, and we'll talk about that today, at the campfire process, which is the name that Brandon gave that empty out experience that happened during her original session. And then what happened was, as she started doing this empty out process, she discovered and uncovered all these natural forgiveness skills that she would say, have the person's higher self, what would need to happen here in order for you to heal, in order for you to forgive, in order for you to allow your body to let go of whatever the illness was, or the situation, or the depression, whatever it was. And she found that universally they came up with about six things that almost everybody would say this would need to happen. And so she facilitated, and then it turned into what we call the advanced skills with the journey work that I taught for years. So those 6 forgiveness skills ended up being kind of the core. And what I think, and I still use those in my personal processing with clients today.
Wow. Okay. Let me just stop you again. I'm sorry. But again, I'm thinking about people that don't know anything about the journey, and I think there are large numbers of people who don't know anything about the journey. I've read the book. I've also had a couple of journey sessions facilitated by her ex-husband, Bob. And to me, the journey process starts with a phrase that sort of comes out of body electronics, where you lovingly and willingly endure the pain of whatever it might be. You don't try to stop it. You don't try to escape from it. You don't try to, make it go away. You just say, okay, I'm opening to this pain. I'm opening to this emotion, whatever it might be. And you just sort of sink into it, allow it to be, and fully experience it. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but then you sort of drop down through that and say, what's underneath that pain? And you go to another level. And that's kind of begins the journey of going through multiple different levels, dropping down through each different successive emotion. So for instance, the first emotion might be fear. And so you lovingly and willingly open up to the fear and drop down through the fear. And what's underneath fear, and say, well, loneliness. And so you've fully experienced loneliness. And then you open up to that and drop down through loneliness, asking what's beneath that. And you drop through the loneliness to another level. And it might be,
abandonment or hurt or sadness or
And then so you keep dropping down through these levels until you get to basically nothingness. And then you drop down through that. And then at some point you drop down through into connection with your higher source, connection with God or nature or whatever it might be. Is that a fairly accurate description?
Yes, absolutely. So you go down through these levels of emotion, and we would ask people to open up into it, feel it fully, whatever it was, and then drop through to what's beneath it. And people would experience it differently. Sometimes it would feel like the emotion or the energy would rise up, and they'd get this awareness. Sometimes it felt very visceral, and layers of these huge emotional responses. And right as people were getting to the peak, we'd ask them to drop through to the next one. So we didn't stay stuck in the story of it at all. We stayed with the pure amount of the energy, the pain, the hurt, whatever it was, drop through to what's beneath it, drop through to what's beneath that, beneath that, beneath that. And we found that about 90% of people drop through into what we call the unknown zone. You mentioned it, that nothingness. And sometimes the nothingness was this wonderful place of peace, of a void of all of that energy, of all those contractive emotions. And other times it was this place of the ultimate, it's almost like it's the gatekeeper to connection with your spirit and your soul, where people will go, I don't know what it is. It's nothing. It's this void. It's the black hole. And it would just ramp up. And we ended up writing this into the script where, as people would get to that place, we'd say, listen, you're right on the threshold to your connection with the universe. Let yourself go into that. And it was so scary. We had to create a bunch of little sub skills to get people to just allow themselves to feel it. When they did, they went from all this contractive emotion to this expansive place of feeling some peace. And then we'd say, go right into the core of that. Then they would feel, freedom, go into the core of that. Then what would you feel? Love. And then they would get to this place. They would lose the confine of their become connected. It was a oneness experience is what it was. And they would become connected with everything. And from that place, when you can trust that part of your being to then offer up these pearls of wisdom, they're there for everybody. You almost become your own, in terms of, you become your own mentor, your own higher self, your own guru at that point, because the wisdom of the universe is inside of every single one of us. It's stunning.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I don't mean, I'm talking about, I've watched little kids do this, 6 and 7 year olds that when they open into this place and they're sobbing of connection with the universe, and then you ask them for wisdom, and when it pours out of them, you can't see this right now, but I've got goosebumps remembering process work where I've sobbed with little children as they recognize themselves as being part of everything. And it's the most divine experience as a practitioner to be able to take people through that process. It's phenomenal. And so from that place, then we go back through the layers of all the emotion and go back to where the root core of the pain was.
Right. So you go back step by step by step by step by step, each of the different layers
Clearing
back through.
Yeah.
And you ask, what wisdom does, source have to pain? What does wisdom have to loneliness? Right? Is that correct?
Yes. And the things that are said out of these people's mouths are, it's unbelievable. And there's a clearing that happens because, again, like you said, you're not trying to do anything other than open up into it and let the wisdom wash through it. And it gets obliterated and cleared at a cellular level by the opening into it and then allowing the wisdom to speak, to say, well, this was here for a reason.
Right.
And the wisdom is incredible that comes out of people.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the great point, that it's there for a reason. This fear, this loneliness, those different levels that you drop down. Yeah. And if you open up to it and let wisdom speak to it from the source, it changes, it evolves, it does what it needs to do in order to move on. You remove the stuckness. That's the removing of what had been stuck previously. Now, in that journey, along the way somewhere, there is a campfire process that takes place. Often, at least, is it often? Is it always?
Always.
Okay.
Always with the journey, there's a campfire process.
So this is where I get confused. Where does that campfire process take place? Tell me about that.
Okay, so as you go down through the levels of the different emotions, especially at the beginning, you're asking a question. Is anybody's face or any people associated with this emotion? And sometimes it's no. And then you just keep asking the question. And then at the first point where somebody says, yes, my mother showed up, my father's here, my ex-husband or my ex-wife is here, or a childhood friend or my third grade class showed up. Right? They get this sense or knowing that there's a person or a group of people that are associated with it. This is on the first part when you're journeying down through. As you're saying, yep, you're feeling that. Say, for instance, you started with fear. Open up into the fear, feel it fully, let it all come. And are any people or pictures associated with this? I got you. And if they say yes, then you say, well, what is it? And you write that down as you're going down through the levels. And if they don't say anything, then you just go, okay, no problem. What's the next one? And then you ask the question again. And as soon as somebody does show up, you stop asking that question. And that's the level that you have the campfire process. So when you come back up after having gone to source, you come back up. And that when you get to that level, then you say, hey, you guys that were here, third grade class, whatever it is, let's meet around a campfire and have a chat. Exactly. Right. And then what you're doing is you're setting up a place in the core of whatever the pain was, whatever the root emotion. Yeah. And, one of the things that we didn't specify at the beginning of talking about the journey is there are two processes. There's one called the emotional journey and one called the physical journey. And we're talking about the emotional journey right now. Oh, okay. So, So the emotional journey, and everything's emotional. Even when there's a physical issue, it's all emotional. But the emotional journey takes that's when we all do first clients. And you learn how to combine it all. Could I just stop you real quick? Sure. It broke up there a little bit. Could you go back to you were starting to say about the emotional journey? Yeah, I said, right. So there's the emotional and the physical journey. Even though everything's emotional, it's all based on emotions. The emotional journey takes you down through the levels of the emotion to get in touch with source. And you wash back through as you get to the one where you have started, where someone showed up. That's where you're having the empty out process with the campfire. Okay. The physical journey actually is once you've done this experience and you've been able to contact your source, that oneness experience, then that lasts forever, right? That's something that then people can then trust their body, trust their mind, trust their spirit, trust their soul, trust their wisdom. And then we guide, with the physical journey, we guide people through a different experience, which might have to be a different show, where we're talking about going inside the body to a specific cell memory to be able to clear that cell memory. So that's what we call the physical journey. It's all emotional.
What? You're doing what? You're going to what? What did you just say?
I said we travel inside the body. I know this is a little weird. We have this guided imagery where we reconnect people to their source. We get them to envision a mentor, kind of like, I don't know if anybody did Silva Mind Control. I did that, God, when I was 11 back in the early 70s.
I remember you saying so. Yeah, I did it when I was 17, but that's amazing. But so you get a mentor like Silva?
Get a mentor kind of like Silva, and then you go into this place where you travel inside the body where there's a cell memory stored.
So this is a guided imagery sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You literally are imagining yourself getting inside like a space shuttle. And kids love this. We've done this with hundreds of thousands of children, and they go through it like, amazingly. And adults do it too. I mean, universally, everybody does it.
Okay, so it's a guided imagery to a cell memory?
A cellular memory, right? You get, I mean, that, okay, we're going to get into the minutia of the physical journey if we're not careful. Let's stick with the emotional journey right now.
Okay, so we'll do another episode. Okay, we'll do another episode.
Okay. So let's go back to the emotional journey. So you've traveled down through, you've connected with source, you're washing back through and washing through all the layers of the emotion. You get to the one where the campfire process is the one that was starred, where somebody came through. Okay. And if somebody doesn't come up going down through the levels, which happens every once in a great while, you just go to the one where they had the biggest emotional response.
Okay.
That you as the practitioner are intuiting that's the one where they had the biggest emotional response.
So you're coming up through these levels, you get to the level where the people were associated, or some people were, then you sort of take a break through the process of going through the levels, and you step out of the process for a moment, and you visualize a campfire where, because it's a nice sort of informal setting, people are invited in to be with you in this campfire. Yeah,
everybody kind of, has a good experience of maybe being camping and sitting around the campfire and being able to talk. So you invite the people that were in that memory as they were going down through the levels, and then you say, who else needs to show up?
Okay.
And then other people will start showing up at this imaginary campfire that you're placing at this level of emotion. And then you say, who is it that the younger you needs to speak to clear the core memory of this pain? So someone will step forward in their mind's eye, and the younger you can be any part of you. It can be any part of you other than an hour ago or a few minutes ago, all the way back. And I've had people, be babies in the womb.
Wow.
And so that little younger you, then we go through this process of this empty out process of speaking to the person that caused them the pain. And so the power of this, which is, to me, is where the real healing is coming from, is it gives that opportunity for everything that wasn't said at the time to be said. And the Gestalt-like experience, right? You're going back and forth and you're saying what else needs to be said, what really needs to be said. And you're having the person speak from that little, however old they were.
Right.
And then you say, and then he's emptied out, you say, well, now I want you to step inside the consciousness of the other person, and what would they say in response?
Okay, good.
So it's almost like you have them be in their body,
right,
and speak first person back to the younger you about what they would say in response to what the younger you had said to them.
Gotcha.
Then you say, what else? And then we keep going back and forth between the younger you and that person until everything that needed to be said. And then we do these forgiveness processes, as I was telling you. And then we have that same empty out with the present day you, the you now, to make sure that there's completion.
That sounds intense. And I remember it being intense, actually, when I did it with Bob a couple of times.
It is intense, yeah.
And you mentioned the forgiveness process. Tell me more about that.
So what we've experienced and what I've specifically experienced is that just about every single person comes to a point, especially if it's a real core memory and there was some extreme pain, where, say, mom or dad did some things. And for me, I would say probably the first, I know this sounds like a lot, probably the first 50 journey processes that I did during my life, all were with my father, because I had some real, I had a bit of a tough childhood, and I had a bunch of issues with my dad that I needed to resolve. And so my father would keep coming up at the campfire, and a little younger you would empty out a specific, pain from a story that I was holding on to. And he would speak back. And then you would say, well, what would the best part of him say? But sometimes it wasn't like he wouldn't say, hey, I'm sorry. And what we found is that pretty much until you can't, that person, that younger you can forgive that person from the bottom of their heart, that the physical and emotional healing does not quite take place. And they, even though there's a clearing, the story stays stuck in them. And so that's so often with, like I find in different therapeutic practices, somebody will say, well, gosh, this is the same story that I've been, that I'm familiar with, and I've emptied this out. I've talked about it in therapy and blah, 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 and they're like, why is this coming up again? It's because you didn't empty it out at the cellular level, and there wasn't that deep soul felt forgiveness that you were done with the story. There wasn't completion. You came to an understanding. You came to an awareness. You cleared aspects of that. You've spoken to people that don't believe in forgiveness, right? They go, I don't believe in forgiveness. Everything happens for a reason and a purpose. My experience is that until somebody forgives on that deepest level, it's really difficult for them to be fully done with the pain and with the story. So one of the things is, and when I say forgiveness, I'm talking about traumatic abuse, sexual abuse, physical, verbal, mental, things that have caused post-traumatic stress. Oh my gosh, any number of things that were said, and everybody's perspective on how deep that level of forgiveness has to go is different.
Yeah.
But for the really difficult cases, we would say to people, well, what would your higher self say needs to happen? We would bring down this mentor, which was their higher self that they could associate with, because it's hard for them to think that they have all that wisdom.
Right.
So we would say if there was a mentor, a guide, a spirit, a presence, a guardian angel that could speak to you and tell you what you need to hear at that time, what would it be? Now, it's their higher self that's speaking. So the process would be we'd stand that younger you up in front of them. And I found that there are basically a handful of things that need to happen and I can say this, out of probably 25,000 people that I facilitated through either in groups or in person, I maybe have not been able to get 4 or 5 people to forgive. And I mean, things that have happened that I wouldn't even repeat because they're so horrendous. Including a lot of, veterans that have had, these experiences where they were traumatized. And what that is the younger you needs to know that other person had a full experience and fully understands how much actions caused the other person, the younger you. So, and what I mean by that is, like we say, does that person, whoever it is, say your dad, know how much pain their actions caused the younger you?
Right.
98% of the time they say no, they don't know that. So you say, have that younger you, have the person step inside the body of the younger you and soak up all the pain to get an idea of how much pain you were feeling at the time. And when they've had as much of it as they can take, they'll step back out. And then what would they say to the younger you?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
What that does is that facilitates the younger you and the person who's the client being able to recognize, oh, wow, because the person inevitably every time steps out and says, holy crap, I had no idea when I said that or did that, how much it hurt you. And they say, I'm so sorry, right? That's what happens in this Gestalt empty out process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't happen, and sometimes it doesn't, you say, does that little younger you have any idea how much pain, for instance, your father was in at the time? Step inside your father and feel the pain that he was feeling. So then when that person energetically steps inside, they go, oh my God, my dad was, scared to death. He was enraged. He was hurt. And it's almost like psychically they can feel what the pain that's been passed down generationally from that person. And then what you do is you say, go another level deeper. What's underneath that? What's underneath that? And what we, just like a drop through that we were talking about earlier, what we find is that almost the same levels of pain that you're feeling, right? The client's feeling, the person at the campfire, it's almost identical.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And then we say, now step inside the best part of them, inside of their source, inside of their soul, the best part of them, and look out of their eyes at that little younger you standing in front of them. What are they feeling as they look at you? And especially if it's a parent, they go, oh my God, there's so much love. They just didn't know how to tell me. You tell them to step back in their own body, open up a window in their chest, and let a lifetime of that love that they never received come pouring in. Now, if it's a family member or a parent or, a partner or loved one, that experience is life transformation because they get to fill themselves up with all of that love that they wanted and never received. So it feels like there's a level of completion there. And then the next skill that we do is we say, have that little younger you that experienced all that pain and there's residue there, have their mentor step inside them and imagine the little younger you is holding out a wooden box and allow them to wash out all the residue of all the existing pain in their mind, their heart, their body, or pull out, if it's a physical issue, pull out everything that needs to be healed so the body can heal itself naturally. And we call this the sweep clean, or it might be hosing you down, washing you out. I literally will tell clients to imagine that they're pulling out these big hunks of emotion and putting it in the box getting heavy or fuller. So you're doing submodalities to get them to recognize that there's an empty out happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, when that mentor, that guide, that guardian angel is finished and you're completely clean and washed clean, let them step back out and let me know when that happens. So you give them all the time that they need. Then the younger you puts a lid on the box, ties it up with a ribbon, throws it onto the campfire of unconditional love and acceptance and lets it obliterate. And so that they're letting go of all the old pain in the story.
Right. Wow.
So it's basically an NLP process, right? An empty out. In essence, and then,
oh wow, keep going,
and then we do a cord cut, an energetic, a legacy cord cut that we say, see the little younger you with almost like an umbilical cord stretched between you and that person, where that story has been proliferated, it continues, and when you're ready, cut that cord, sending their source back to them and your source back to you so that you can be free. So, and what happens, the only time I ever find is say it's a parent and they go, well, I don't want to have a connection with my mom or my dad. And we're like, no, it's not the good things that we're letting go of and cutting that connection. It's the old story of pain that's been keeping us stuck. And that once we cut that, we can be free. What's the look on their face when you free them? And they see this experience of that person across from them smiling or surprised or shocked or thrilled that you cut that cord.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so then you go back and say, is there anything else that needs to be said? So this is it takes a while, but it's a very thorough empty out process.
Yeah.
And then you do it with the present day you. And it goes much quicker. With the younger you, it takes a while. And you repeat that with the present day you.
Wow.
And then you do an integration where you get the younger you to step back in once I take that back. There's a step that I'm missing. And then you're saying we have a very specific forgiveness phrase in the journey where you ask, is that younger you, knowing that that person caused you all of this pain, and are you willing to completely and utterly forgive them from the bottom of your heart? And when the person says yes, you say the words, I forgive you, because it has a resonance in the body. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll say, would that person be willing to forgive you? Especially if it's a parent, because there's situations that happen between the two of you. And I do that with the younger you and the present day you to make sure that forgiveness is going in all directions. And there's a level of completion with clients that is unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, it's like, I recently had a client whose sister had been killed 35 years before, had been murdered. And there was a podcast, one of those crime podcasts that was coming up. And all of this emotion. And this was a friend of mine. She couldn't sleep. And I remember when her sister got killed. And she was like, I'm a wreck. I don't know. And I got in and did this with her and her sister, and it cleared that 35 years of pain in one session.
One session that lasted how long?
3 hours, 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Now, and that's the work that I'm doing now with this life quake recovery of people that have gone through these major stack ups. I call it a life quake pile up of major life transition events that are like the loss of a loved one that they're grieving, or they've been fired, or they have an illness, or, they had a financial travesty or something, where these experiences pile up and it's hard for them to clear on their own. And we go in and do a series of 3 of these sessions to do a great big cleanup over about a month period. So it's 1 week, 1 week, 1 week. And by the end of the month, even people that have never done any kind of this work before, it's incredibly life-changing for them. Big clear-ups.
So were there 5 steps, 6 steps of the forgiveness process?
There were, let me see, I talked about the inside. We call it the inside-outside, where the person steps inside the body of the person across from them, then they step back out. What would they say? Right? And then the outside inside, that's where the person that has caused the pain goes in, feels it, steps back out. Then there's the sweep clean, which is the clearing everything out, putting it in the box, and then burning it up. There's the cord cut, 2, 3, 4, the energy tie, the legacy, legacy of pain, whatever name. There's different names depending on the situation. And then we do a change memory process, a classic change memory.
Change history?
Yeah. Well, we'll go back in and say, and just see the memory changing. Obviously, it doesn't change what happened, but it changes their representation internally of what happened. That's just an extra little added thing. And then every once in a while, we do 2 more things. One is, and I use pretty much every time, I'll say, ask the mentor, why did all this happen? And what did you need to learn so it never has to happen again? We call that the karma mentor.
Wow.
What's the karma that you've learned from this experience? And then the other one is sometimes in a process, and Brandon had added it in as one of the skills. And I know this is going to sound kind of strange, but I've done a ton of work with sexual abuse clients, and we're always able to get the forgiveness to happen. And every once in a while, you'll say, if that person was serving a purpose so that you could learn a lesson, can you give them an award for playing their part in this this kind of story, this cosmic experience, so that you could learn whatever this lesson was. Now, it's hard when it's sexual abuse to say, hey, you did this so I could learn this lesson. But there are other times when that might be appropriate, where either the younger you gets this little award for doing what they needed to do at the time, or the other person. So we call it the Academy Award. So it's almost like you're receiving an award or you're giving an award to the other person for playing their part. And I'll put it in a context. Personally, one of the experiences that I had a ninth grade teacher, a math teacher, that this came up for me. And he had told me that I was stupid and that I would never graduate from college. And I was at an all-boys Catholic prep school where I grew up in Arkansas. And so it devastated me. I'm thinking, I really believed him and thought I was incapable of doing math. So when it was time to go to college, for those people that listened to the last episode, where did I go to school? Clown college. You don't need any math at clown college. And I went into acting because on some level, unconsciously, and I didn't even realize this, I believed that I wouldn't be able to pass math classes in college. And I just struggled. And I had a crappy teacher who basically berated me, which is what everybody got berated when they were younger. But I took it to heart, carried it, didn't realize it, unconscious. Years later, I bring him to the campfire. And then it's like, well, what's the lesson? And my mentor says, you need to thank him and give him an award, because if he hadn't have said that to you, you probably would have gone into business. You would have gone to business school with your father. And right now, what you're doing is you went to clown college, you went to acting school, which drove you to New York and LA, which allowed you to work with all, learn the NLP and all the different skills. And now what are you doing? You're standing on stage and helping people wake up to their authentic self and clear that pain, because this man pushed you in a direction all those years ago that you didn't even realize. And that was my higher self giving me that ultimate karmic awareness. And when it was like, oh my gosh, I have to thank him for saying that to me at the time, no matter how hurtful it was, so that I can own who I am today. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So it's a powerful tool in certain circumstances, not in all. So it's the inside outside, stepping in, feeling the pain of the other person going down through the levels, stepping back out, opening up a window in your chest. The outside inside, which allows the person at the campfire to step inside the younger you, feel the pain. They step back out and speak first, because if the younger you speaks first, they'll go, see, you hurt me, because they haven't forgiven yet. The sweep clean, let the mentor, the guardian angel go in, sweep you clean, hose out everything. The cord cut, the energetic cord of the story that's been passing between you cut. Then the karma mentor, which you get to understand why it happened so it never happens again. And then in certain circumstances, the Academy Award, where that person played their part so that you could be who you are today or learn what you needed to learn so that you are where you are.
And also the speaking of I forgive you part.
Oh, and then the forgiveness on top of it, along with the emptying out.
Right.
And then what we find, if we say, can you forgive? And they say no, at the simplest level, that just means something was not said at the campfire. Right. So we go back and say, well, what needs to be said for forgiveness to happen?
Right.
And that facilitates it in probably 97% of all sessions that you would do without having to do necessarily all the other stuff. But I find that when all of those other skills are done, their association to that past pain is just finished. It's very thorough.
Well, Skip, I know we've been on this call for quite some time already, and I still have more questions. So
yeah.
Would you be willing to come back and do another episode?
Doug, this is, I love being able to share this, because these skills that are, I want to say, battle tested, they work.
Yeah.
And I wish more people really knew them at that core level.
Well,
so
let me ask you, because it's 2021 and you haven't taught the journey process for how many years now?
Gosh, probably I stopped and then I went back for a while. So probably 5 years I haven't taught the journey process.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I do the work with clients, but I haven't taught it publicly.
Right. So, and now you're doing the Lifequake things and other things that are probably related and bringing things out, I'm assuming. But, yeah, I mean, it's just one of the questions that I have is why don't you teach it anymore? I mean, what has changed for you in this journey with the journey does seem quite remarkable. And wow, yeah. As you're telling me about it, I'm remembering my journey process with Bob and thinking, oh, I remember when I did that with, and it's amazing. It's amazing work. And I can see why it takes 3-4 hours, per session. And I can see also last time you said that a lot of times people come to you from a distance. They'll come to Boulder from wherever. And so you'll just clear the day and you do a morning session and an afternoon session. And then you tell them, whatever you do, don't plan on doing anything tonight. Just get some sleep. Right.
Because if people are sometimes wiped out to the point where they're letting go of so much, their body starts to detox and they have, they're exhausted. I've had people had flu-like symptoms, especially if they're doing cancer or some kind of a physical issue that they're having to deal with on a physical level. And I'll have couples come and work with couples that have had a lot of pain between the two of them. And I'll work with the husband on one day, the wife on another, and then I'll work with the two people for the full day together.
Wow.
So yeah. And so what I've been doing for the last 5 years and longer actually is I downloaded kind of in a meditation, this awareness of what makes people tick. And I call it the touchstone, which is a 16-step model of how people move through life. And I look at life as this big nonlinear experience. It's like we're all over the place. Sometimes it's messy, but it's almost like a big ball of yarn that your experience goes all over the place. But you can't really pull it apart, analyze it, and see it. So what I've done is I pulled it apart with this touchstone, made it this 16-step linear model of how we should develop and the skills that are necessary for a really healthy, full, whole development as a human being, and where the pitfalls are, and where the ticking time bombs have been created, and where we need to go back in and remove those blocks and limitations with things that have happened to us in our past, especially our childhood. And then I use the journey skills. I use the Enneagram. I talk about attachment theory in relationships. There's a whole section. Big part of it really is about recognizing that we're all facing our mortality and we're not going to be here forever, and embracing that and learning how to embrace death to be able to live fully. And so this model that I've created, I'm literally just releasing. I've been working on it for on and off for 10 years, and it is in the Lifequake model. So,
let me just stop you there because that's a good little cliffhanger to leave you on, and we will have you back sometime for episode 3 of the Skip Lackey podcast.
Sounds great, Doug. This is always a joy, to be able to talk with you. You are a master. You are a master, my friend.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
But let me just say, thank God you sucked at math. That's all I could say.
Yeah.
It's a bad math teacher.
Well, and the interesting thing about it, years later, I was in film school in my mid-30s, and I said we were learning aperture openings and all that, and it required algebraic equations. And I told the professor, the teacher of the cinematography class, I said, "Look, I'm not really great at math, so I might need to ask you a bunch of questions." And he said to me, he said, "Skip, you set the curve in the class. You're the bright, you've scored the best score of any student of 44 classes that we've ever had come through here. What the hell are you talking about?" And that was what facilitated me to go back during a journey process and actually do that work with my math teacher, because I was like, okay, something's not jiving here. And I didn't understand what it was. And that was when my higher self went, oh,
nice.
That's what this is for. Yeah. So it's amazing the wisdom that we all, maintain.
Yeah. Well, until next time, thank you so much for today. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, my friend.
That's so much. It's so wonderful. Thank you.
I look forward to the next one.
This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.